Congresswoman Delia Ramirez has just revealed her false allegiance to the United States in a speech in Mexico City that she gave recently, where she said that she is Guatemalan first before she is an American. Now, obviously, this is problematic because she's an American representative. She's in Congress. So, obviously, if she identifies as Guatemalan first, she doesn't represent the interests of the American people. So we're going to look at the comments that she said. We have a tweet here from Charlie Kirk where he says Spanish speakers confirmed what she said. Now, I will say she did kind of word it weirdly. I do speak Spanish, so I can understand what she said, but it seems like she kind of stumbled or missed the word somewhere. So some people are kind of trying to misconstrue what she said as I'm American, I'm Guatemalan, but I'm American first. But really what she said is I'm Guatemalan first, before American. So I'm going to play the clip. Obviously, it's in Spanish and it's not translated, but I'll tell y'all word for word what she said, and y'all can judge for yourselves. So here it is. She says, I want to give some words in Spanish. She said, because I am Guatemalan with a lot of pride. She says primero, which is first, but it could be understood as before I'm American. So I guess that would be what she was actually trying to say. But I think she kind of worded it weirdly. It's fine. I looked at other clips of her speaking Spanish, and it seems her Spanish is good. I think maybe she just, like I said, missed a word. But obviously, it's very clear what she's trying to say. She's trying to say, I'm Guatemalan. I identify as Guatemalan before American. Or I'm Guatemalan first before American. And Charlie Kirk here says, 3 Spanish speakers have confirmed to me that Representative Delia Ramirez says in this clip that she puts her Guatemalan pride ahead of her identity as an American. Any person who values any other country over America does not belong in Congress, period. Now, I'd actually challenge Charlie Kirk on this, and I would say any person who values any other country over America doesn't belong in America, to be honest. I mean, as long as you're not a tourist or something, or a visitor, somebody on a work visa, like if you're a citizen of the United States, then you should only value the United States. You should only, like I said, you can replace any person who values any other country over America, should be a citizen of that country. If you identify with Guatemala over the United States, then you're a Guatemalan citizen. Then go be Guatemalan. Nobody has you here by force. You can always self-deport, or well, I guess she wouldn't be deporting. She is an American citizen, but you can always make yourself a citizen voluntarily of Guatemala. I'm sure they'll gladly accept somebody of this lady's talent. We see here on the second tweet from this person, Adam Johnston. Ilhan Omar had a similar comment. Sleep in comfort knowing that I'm here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. Why are these people representing American citizens when they themselves don't identify as Americans? That is a big problem. That sounds to me like foreign influence in our government. Kind of like what Israel's doing, kind of in a different way, but we'll save that for another video. Now, I believe Matt Walsh put out a tweet saying something like she should be denaturalized, deported, things like this. Now, this is very extreme language, obviously. I don't know if I'm fully in agreement, but there is something to that. I mean, it's a big problem currently with the Hispanic population in the United States, particularly first-generation Hispanics, particularly Mexicans. I say this as first-generation American from Mexican parents. A lot of first-generation Mexican Americans, or Americans really, born from Mexican parents, don't really have an affiliation to the United States, and they feel that they're better represented by Mexico. Now, of course, you get into an argument with these people, and they'll come up with some nonsense about why they won't go back to Mexico, despite them identifying with it and flying their flags. I mean, you guys have seen the parades, the protests where they're flying Mexican flags and burning American flags or whatever. And of course, that's all nonsense. So there's something to be said about denaturalizing people and sending them to a country that they more identify with. Because essentially what you're doing when you allow illegal immigration kind of unchallenged, essentially what you're doing is creating foreign agents in your country. You're basically letting people in that don't identify with their country, don't care about its values, don't care about supporting it or providing for it in any way. They just come here to extract resources, the immigrants do, and then their children have the same ideology, they have the same thought process. They think, I'm coming here just to make money. That's the only reason why I won't go back to my country, or to the country I identify with, even though I'm born and raised in the U.S., I identify with Mexico or wherever. The only reason I won't go back is because the money's here. I'm here to extract resources, but really my heart is in another country. and I don't really care about the United States. So obviously that's a problem. Look, if I was supreme dictator, I'd put everybody on a path to citizenship, shut down the border. Obviously, it'd be a rigorous path. Everybody would have to speak good English. You'd have to pass a very hard history test. You'd have to accept certain ideas. Obviously, renounce your citizenship wherever else you're from. But that would only be if I was supreme dictator. I would have control over the border, over the people that come in, over the whole process. No cracks, no leaks. Everybody who's a citizen would have a certain set of ideals, morals. They'd be able to, like I said, to pass a civics test. They'd have a certain level of English, a good level of English, right? Not just basic, passable English. But unfortunately, we don't have a dictator. Well, unfortunately, not me anyway. I wouldn't want anybody to be dictator. But if I was dictator, I'm just saying I could fix this country. My point is, I'm not fully in support of mass deportations. But when the result is people like this, who don't have an allegiance to your country, who have an allegiance somewhere else, and are basically here to represent the interests of another country, well then yeah, of course you're going to want to deport all of them. So we'll send them back to the country that they identify with, even if they themselves are born here. Yeah, I'm in support of birthright citizenship. Until I see something like this. Obviously, I'm a product of birthright citizenship. But then you see something like this, and you're like, okay, well, obviously birthright isn't, you're not identifying as American by birthright. You're not identifying as American at all. So then what makes you American? Like, what does it take? This place gives you free education and, health. It gives you a decent level of health care. It gives you resources. Obviously, your parents came here illegally for a reason. And you still identify with whatever, third world country your parents came from. How, in what world does that make sense? So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like I said, when I see things like this, yeah, mass deportations, get rid of birthright citizenship, send them all back. Hell, send second generation immigrants back. Obviously, I'd be affected by that, even first generation Americans. So obviously, I don't support that. I don't support the repealing of birthright citizenship either. But like I said, I understand why people are in favor of it when they see things like this. We're going to react to, well, maybe let's read some tweets here. Oh, so you do see this also. Not just Matt Walsh saying this, that she should be denaturalized, deported, or whatever else. This is Congressman Andy Ogles. Don't know who he is. He calls for Delia Ramirez to be kicked off the House Homeland Committee, denaturalized, and deported. And he says, we know where her allegiances lie. Enough said. Senator Tim Scott calls for Republican Representative Delia Ramirez to resign for saying, I'm a proud Guatemalan before I am an American. Anyone who has taken the oath of office who says their allegiance is to another country, they have betrayed their oath of office. And that's really the point of my video today, is where her allegiance lies. And that's a problem with a lot of these dual nationals, is that you don't know where their allegiance is. They're confused. They can't, if the United States was to go to war with another country, you want to be sure that the people who have a potential conflict of interest, I guess, a potential dual nationality issue, you want to be certain that the people in your country would choose your country. Because that's what makes them, that's why they pledge an allegiance. That's what you're saying when you pledge allegiance. This is my country. I would defend it against any other country, despite me having ties to it. If the United States goes to war with Mexico, I'd gladly be on the United States side because I identify as American. It seems like Delia Ramirez, if we were to go to war with Guatemala, would not be on the United States side. You know what I mean? You're supposed to identify with your country, and this is something, I forgot his name, but a historian wrote about this, and you guys can see it. I mean, rude countries, third world countries, they're all very patriotic. I mean, you look at Mexicans, any South American country, really, even when they come here, despite the fact that they're from a third world country where they have no resources, and that's the whole reason they came here, despite that, they still love their country, identify with it, support it. Some of them maybe haven't lived there, have lived here longer than they've lived in their home country. And unfortunately, we don't have that here. Flying an American flag is somehow a symbol for racism or something, according to the liberals. So that's a problem. If you have dual nationals in this country who can't with certainty pledge allegiance to your country's in disarray. The people in your community aren't interested in your community. We'll see some other tweets here. I think I read this from Tim Scott. Some people calling her a racist Democrat. Yeah, there's not really much else to see here. Oh yeah, she's a big, of course, as you would expect, she's a big critic of Trump and immigration policies. I can imagine why. We'll watch some videos. I guess we'll all react to some of what the people have to say. I do want to get to a quote from Teddy Roosevelt. It's very pertinent in this situation. I think I might as well, we'll watch these videos. They're kind of short, and then I'll read Teddy Roosevelt's quote. It's very pertinent. It's about people in the United States identifying as or qualifying their identity as Americans. As you can see in the tab, it's hyphenated American. So, for example, in this case, Guatemalan American, or in my case, Mexican American, or Native American, or whatever. And back in his day, it was more French or Irish American. And he's saying you should be fully committed to the idea of being American and not some qualified version of an American. We'll play this video. I'll react to it.
Figures on the American right are calling for a Democratic Congresswoman from Illinois to be stripped of her seat and deported. The outrage stems from comments made by Representative Delia Ramirez during an appearance in Mexico City, where the Congresswoman said in Spanish that she was a proud Guatemalan before an American. Ramirez is the daughter of Guatemalan immigrants, but was born in Chicago. The comments sparked outrage among conservatives. Republican Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee wrote on denaturalize, deport, and
I believe this is the one we read earlier.
Ramirez serves on the Committee on Homeland Security in Congress. The official account for the Department of Homeland Security also weighed in, responding with a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that said there is no room
so this is where I found
hyphenated American.
So this is where I found the quote from the Department of Homeland Security. I think that's what he said. Some account like that tweeted the Teddy Roosevelt quote, and that's where I got I pulled the full, I don't know if it's a speech, it's like an address or something. And we'll read the thing in full here, or at least that part of the address.
With a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that said there is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. Ramirez herself also now responding. In a post on X, she said, honoring my Guatemalan ancestry only strengthens my commitment to America.
Honoring my Guatemalan ancestry, but that's not what you did. That's not what you did. She didn't say, I'm a Guatemalan ethnically. What she's saying, and even if you were, it doesn't matter. That's not what this country's about. You know, I hear Sargon from the Lotus Eaters, Carl Benjamin. I don't really get, look, as an American, I don't really identify with this idea. I don't really understand this idea of him saying, you know, Anglo or the British of ethnicity. That's how you identify people who are British, and criticizing the England soccer team for having black people on there and saying these people aren't English. I don't understand that. That doesn't fit in my American brain, because to me, being American isn't, obviously to nobody in America, or at least to most people anyway, is not an ethnicity thing. It's about identity. It's about identifying with it, having American values, growing up here, being born here, being a part of the culture of America. And I think generally in any part of the world, that's what makes you a citizen of that country. You know, if you're born and raised in Japan, despite the fact that you're black, I mean, yeah, sure, the Japanese might see you differently. Maybe they don't think you're Japanese. But to the rest of the world, you're going to be Japanese because you only speak Japanese. And I mean, you might not look Japanese, but the culture is more important than your bloodline. Your bloodline is almost arbitrary in a way. The culture is the most pertinent part. It's everything about you. It's what makes you who you are. Your ethnicity is maybe just what you look like. But where you were raised and grow up, that's who you are. So her being of Guatemalan ancestry or ethnicity or whatever, it doesn't mean anything. You know? The only reason she brought it up is because her parents are Guatemalan. You know? Nobody who is like a 8th generation American, who has like, you know, some Irish great grandparent or something, is like, oh, I'm Irish first before American. Doesn't make any sense. Makes no sense at all. So obviously that's nonsense what she said.
Ramirez has been a vocal critic of President Trump, especially when it comes to immigration policy.
Yeah, why am I not surprised? So here they bring up the Teddy Roosevelt quote again. Americanism is a matter of the spirit and of the soul. That's what I'm saying right now with the ethnicity and culture thing. It's more about who you are inside. You know what I mean? What you look like doesn't mean anything. You know? Not to come off sounding mumbo jumbo here, but yeah, it's really about how you identify, the culture you have, where you grew up, the ideas, the values, morals we have. That's what makes you, that's how you can identify what country somebody's from, not from the color of their skin, you know. As much as I like Carl Benjamin, I never understand that. But to be fair, that's more of like a UK thing. That's more, I don't know. They have a long history. You know, the history of the United States is one of immigration. They don't really have that history. So, same with the Japanese. So, it makes more sense in their case. But all I'm saying is in the United States, your ethnicity is irrelevant. I'm going to skim through this. I think it's mostly things I've covered already. Let me see what Trump said. Okay, they tweeted the DHS thing. Our allegiance must be pure to the United States. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance. And that's what she's basically saying. She has allegiance to a country other than the United States. You know, as someone who's a fan of soccer, it always bothers me when there's dual nationals who want to play for the United States or Mexico. I realize I'm losing a lot of my audience here. It's probably American, don't watch soccer. And I probably lost the soccer fans also because they're like, why didn't you call it football? Anyway, it really bothers me, this idea of dual nationals, because, like I said, it should be easy to identify what country you're from. It's where were you born and raised in? Which culture do you have the most of? Now, mind you, unfortunately, this is getting harder to detect because, especially in the South, Hispanic culture is kind of taking over the southern United States. Because there's pockets of places. There are places here in Dallas where if you didn't speak Spanish, it would be very hard. I imagine it'd be very hard to navigate, you know? Entire shopping centers where everything's in Spanish. Like to find an English speaker would be a challenge. So the culture is kind of invasive. And, you know, the only way to reverse this, the only way to fix it would be mass deportations and stronger assimilation. So, and of course, maybe even repealing the birthright citizenship. That's the only way to really bring back a culture and make a cohesive culture again. Yeah, we read this from Andy Ogles. Okay, so this is her response. Let's call it what it is. Today's attacks are a weak attempt to silence my dissent and invalidate my patriotic criticism of the nativist, white supremacist authoritarians in government. I'm not sure what she means by nativist. I guess she means like being born from somewhere else, like having a bias for people born here, which obviously we should. If that's what nativist means, then I'm fully identifying with that. Obviously, the rest is nonsense, white supremacist, authoritarian. But it's not a patriotic. Well, to be fair, I don't know what criticism she's referring to. So maybe she does have patriotic criticisms. Her comment in the city of Mexico was not really patriotic. Maybe patriotic to Guatemala, but it is a defamation. It is a definition of hypocrisy that members of Congress who betray their oath each day they enable Trump are attacking me for celebrating my Guatemalan American roots. You're not celebrating your Guatemalan American roots. You're saying you're identifying with another country before the United States. That's denying your allegiance to the United States. That's saying you're a dual national. You're a foreign agent. You're a double agent. You have ties to another country. You don't pledge allegiance to the United States. That's what you're saying. Oh, she says exactly what I brought up. This is literally the Teddy Roosevelt quote. She says, no one questions when my white colleagues identify as Irish American, Italian American, or Ukrainian American to honor their ancestry. Now, mind you, I actually don't have a huge issue with that, with saying, with the hyphenated American thing. I get what Teddy Roosevelt is trying to say, like, don't have that dual allegiance. But it's a descriptor of your ancestry, of your ethnicity. Everybody here is from somewhere else. If you identify as Irish American, Guatemalan American, I actually don't have an issue with that. But saying you're Guatemalan American should mean you're American first, not the other way around, how she said. It should mean you're American by nationality and citizenship and allegiance, but you're Guatemalan by maybe ancestry or history or what have you. It should be secondary and almost separate. You should have no allegiance to Guatemala. But what you do have is maybe, a respect for the culture, and I have that. I like Mexican foods. I like, certain Mexican thoughts and ideas and parts of their culture. I find it interesting. Does it mean I have any allegiance to it? No. Has nothing to do with my allegiance to Mexico. Has nothing to do with me identifying as Mexican. I'm Mexican American, but I'm only American in nationality, allegiance, and citizenship. No ties to Mexico whatsoever. And that's not what she's saying when she says she's Guatemalan first. And like I said, this is not what she said, what she's about to say here. I've consistently expressed pride in my heritage and history, a pride also often reflected in the origin stories of my colleagues. That's great. If you have an origin story and you're proud of it, and that's fine, But at the end of the day, you have to say the only country I identify with is the United States. The only country I represent and have ties to is the United States. Only those who believe America should not include the children of immigrants or be diverse would attack me and Americans like me for honoring my roots. Well, obviously I don't believe that, so she just lied. I, of course, do believe America. Well, I don't believe it should be, but I don't believe it should not be. That's a little bit confusing. What I'm saying is America doesn't necessarily have to be diverse, but its diversity is not a problem. I mean, like I said, every American has an immigrant story, as far as the Mayflower or whatever. Everyone here comes from somewhere else. So I don't have a problem with diversity. So, and yet I'm criticizing her. So, and she's, like I said, she's not honoring her roots. That's not what she's doing. She's saying, I have allegiance to another country before the United States. That's what she said. Honoring my Guatemalan ancestry only strengthens my commitment to America. That is the truth I carry with me always. So obviously, oh my gosh, how long is her response? What the heck? I am from both Guatemala and Chicago. Okay, see, like we're living and breathing realization of the idea of America. Yeah, see, like I said, I'm in agreement with this idea. Yeah, of course, America's the land of immigrants. It's multiracial, multicultural, but the problem is the allegiance idea, saying that somewhere else is first before America. Let's see what the five have to say on Fox
First,
News, and then we'll go to the full. You can see here the full quote from Teddy Roosevelt.
A Democratic lawmaker is apparently proud to admit that she's putting her country last. Members of the squad and several House Democrats taking shots at the U.S. during a conference in Mexico City. But Illinois Representative Delia Ramirez is causing the most controversy. She said this.
I want to finish by saying a few words in Spanish because I am a Guatemalan with much pride before I am an American.
Representative Ramirez later tried to clean up that statement by saying this: only those who believe America should not include the children of immigrants or be diverse would attack me. Honoring my Guatemalan ancestry only strengthens my commitment to America. So the White House weighing in, saying that these Democrats' comments are despicable and underscore their commitment to putting Americans last. I always say, Emily, that Peter, my husband, is British by birth but American by choice. And he can be proud of Britain, though he's not at the moment.
So mind you, this is a different situation what she's describing here. Sorry, I forgot this lady's name. I don't watch Fox News that often. If you're born in another country and you live in the United States, that's understandable that you would have kind of a qualm, some type of qualm with full allegiance to the United States. I really have an affinity for Italy. I don't know why. I like their landscapes. I like a lot of things about Italian culture. So I think it'd be nice to retire in Italy or something, a nice mansion on the hills, you know what I'm saying? But I would have an issue with denouncing my American citizenship to be an Italian citizen. But I wouldn't mind being both, And I don't think there's a problem with that necessarily. Now, of course, I do think that should have some kind of repercussions on things like voting. Like, I don't think it would, in that situation, I don't think it would be right for me to vote in either the United States or Italy, being really a citizen of neither. But I'm not in favor of being kind of a citizen of both, right? I'd rather people not be able to vote in either election than in both. That wouldn't make sense. Imagine me living in Italy and voting both in the United States and Italy. Doesn't make sense, unless, like I said, unless if you're willing to denounce the citizenship of your home country and accept the one of your new country, that's fine. So her husband being British American, I think that's fine. It's understandable that he has the hyphen because he's from somewhere. He's probably still has ties to that country. Obviously grew up in that culture, has an affiliation with it, an affinity for it, and is now in the United States. Well, he identifies with both in some way. So it makes sense.
But you can be, but he chose to be an American, and she's a member of Congress.
That's the whole point. Messages matter. When my grandfather immigrated here, he had to renounce his citizenship to Italy to become an American citizen. And then he framed and hung his United States citizenship certificate on the walls in their home for the rest of his life. And I was thinking about that when I saw this segment. I thought, the message that one man, one immigrant sent, how proud he was to be a U.S. citizen, how proud he was to be here. Why can't an elected official have that same pride, even a little bit of that, when you are on the world stage? It sends a really bad message.
What do you think about this?
I think we need to believe them for who they are. Yeah. It's very popular to say, I hate America, because it's...
Right. I think this guy's name is Cyrus. Right. He's right, because she said the thing first, and maybe she didn't expect to get the repercussions she said, right, from what she said. She said, I'm Guatemalan first and American second, basically, is essentially what she was trying to say. And then later she said, oh, they're attacking me because I acknowledge my ancestry. That's not what she said. So you have to believe them when they tell you who they are. So I agree with this sentiment. Like, what she said the first time is what she meant to say, not what she's saying now, trying to play defense.
It's the only place in the world you can do that, you know, and then they try to clean it up. She didn't say that I'm a Guatemalan American,
Right,
you know,
right.
and I love my heritage and I love my country. If you're a Guatemalan first, don't they have government jobs over there? Run over there. Why do you want to serve for a country you don't like? Like this, because there's never consequences for being able to say what you say things. And who are you preaching that to? Like, what person, was there a standing ovation after they say these? They say things because they want, this is the beautiful thing about America, but it's also the ugly thing, is that you can have fake trauma. You can have virtue signaling oppression. You live in the greatest country in the world, so you can bash it all you want. Why? Because it's the greatest country in the world. She didn't come back to no job. She didn't step off a plane and ICE was waiting for her going, oh no, we're sending you back. She'll be allowed to do it. And she doesn't even have the courage or if you're gonna say something, stand by it. Don't try to clean it up and say, I'm more of American because I said that.
Right.
It's like this whole thing, and as a minority, it's one of the most disgusting things to see and I'm not Hispanic, but whenever I see another minority trash the country that they benefit from so well just to get points to do it. Because if they told her she had to leave tomorrow, she'd be kicking and screaming, not.
Right. This is kind of what I mentioned earlier. Like, people will, first generation Americans will identify more with the country that their parents came from than with the United States, despite the fact that this country offered them everything they have. And really, their parents were here without, a love for the United States, essentially to extract resources and send them back home or for their own benefit or what have you. And then the first generation kids that end up being born here have that same mentality. And so they see this country as a way to extract resources for themselves and still have their heart in another country.
Packing her bags going, guess what, guys, we're going to Guatemala.
That's a great point. And I do think that the spin after the fact, Jesse, was hard to swallow.
Well, as a minority, I also agree with Tyrus.
Thank you.
And,
I'm not holding your hand on that one.
and I take offense at the word when she says domination. Because great nations, empires, the British, the French, great empires, have always sought to seek advantages economically and militarily. It just so happens that because of the geography of Guatemala, they were never able to project power outside of their own borders. Sadly, for them. That doesn't mean that they're not a good country. It doesn't mean she shouldn't be proud of her country. Of course she should be proud of Guatemala. They have the best coffee around, and we're going to have to be buying a lot of it because of the tariffs on Brazil, so get used to it. The Mayan Empire was absolutely spectacular. They dominated the entire region. A little brutal. We don't need to get into the details, but they were a very, very wealthy and academically advanced country. The Irish, the Germans, and the Italians were very proud of where they came from. But when they got here, they were also proud to be here. And they tried to assimilate. And as proud as they were of their country.
Right. And this is kind of the difference today, is that assimilation isn't required. Before, it didn't have to be pushed because it's kind of a necessity to live here. I mean, you show up. You're the only person who speaks, I don't know, what have you, Vietnamese, Chinese, or whatever. I'm trying to use a different country as an example. Well, then you had to learn English, and you had to speak English, and you had to hang out with people who spoke English and Americans and interact with them and as Jesse's saying, assimilate. But now, especially Hispanic communities have larger pockets where they kind of seclude themselves from the rest of society, and you don't have to learn English. You can just hang out with other Spanish-speaking people. Never have to interact with an English-speaking person. You can get by with your broken English, or maybe even have no English. We know these people, and you can get by without assimilating.
That they originated from, they didn't denigrate the country they arrived in, and that's my problem. She's denigrating the country she's now living in and benefiting greatly from. So I think she should acknowledge that, yes, the United States has done some bad things, but it's also the greatest force of good in world history. No other country is as great as the United States, and she should acknowledge that. And if she doesn't, I'm calling home and she's going home.
Harold, the melting pot
In
doesn't
full
work
agreement.
if it's just oil and water and everyone lives separately in their own little pockets.
Agree. I could not agree more with Tyrus and Jesse.
Tyrus, I got
story
his name
we had today. This was the most disturbing for me. I said something at the outset in the first segment that I want to retract. I said that Mr. Minnie ran as a socialist, he's a Democrat. These people are not Democrats. Democrats from the standpoint of political parties. Listening to this legislator from Illinois, you took an oath of office to serve in the United States Congress. Tyrus is right. If you feel so strong, and I have no issue or problem, matter of fact, I have no even really emotional response to you wanting to be Guatemalan first, but why not go back to Guatemala and fix the country as opposed to coming here? You chose to come to the country, and we'd happily let you go if you want to go, because there's a long line to come in.
And Guatemala would happily accept her. He's making a lot of sense here.
Of people who love our country, whose stories resemble a lot of the instincts that have been talked about around the table. It's amazing to me. You look at Illinois and you look at some of these places, Massachusetts and New York, where some of the progressives, the socialists serve in Congress. There's a story out today. We have more than 200,000 jobs in this country open today in the welding, electrician, and HVAC categories and spaces. People making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. We're not talking about any of that. The president passed the big, beautiful bill. I was opposed to it. I don't see or listen to any of these people offering legislation or ideas to build on his success or reverse what he's trying to do and make life better for the very people they serve. I was offended by watching her. It moved me in a way that I hadn't been moved watching a politician speak, not in English, and to say, she could say whatever she wanted to say about her heritage, but to talk bad about the country that she not only is a citizen of, but serves in our national legislature. Shame on that Congresswoman.
And speaking of ancestry, this reminds me of Marco Rubio, for example. Is a great example of somebody who acknowledges his roots, but still says, first and foremost and only, I'm American and I have allegiance to America. Is he Cuban by ancestry? I'm not sure. Or Puerto Rican? I'm not sure. He's from somewhere over there. Or his parents are anyway. And he acknowledges his ethnicity, his ancestry. It seems he's proud of it. He speaks good Spanish. But obviously he's American. And that's the difference between someone like Marco Rubio and someone like Delia, I forgot her name, Delia Ramirez, is that he puts America first. And Delia Ramirez seems like she's putting Guatemala first and not really identifying with her American allegiance.
And I retract what I said. Mr. Madami's not a Democrat. He's a socialist. Yep. And as a Democrat, I don't accept that as part of my party.
President Trump says he's a communist. Wonder.
Okay, that's about it here. I'm going to end it with the quote from Teddy Roosevelt. I'm going to read the whole thing. And it is titled, "No Room in This Country for Hyphenated Americans." Addressing the Knights of Columbus in New York, he says, "There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism. When I refer to hyphenated Americans, I do not refer to naturalized Americans. Some of the very best Americans I have ever known were naturalized Americans, Americans born abroad, but a hyphenated American is not an American at all. This is just as true of the man who puts native before the hyphen as of the man who puts German or Irish or English or French before the hyphen. Americanism is a matter of the spirit and of the soul. Our allegiance must be purely to the United States. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance." That's why we pledge allegiance. "But if he is heartily and singly loyal to his republic, to this republic, then no matter where he was born, he is just as good an American as anyone else." Now, mind you, I fully agree with this, which is why I'm not in favor of repealing birthright citizenship. I think you're feeling your inner desire to be American, your identity with America is what makes you American. And I think for the most part, if you're born here, you probably will have that desire. I feel like birthright citizenship is just an easier way to measure that than to ask somebody, "Hey, do you feel American? How do you pledge allegiance to America?" Of course, people in return for citizenship, they'll just say yes. But an easy way to do that, to confirm that, is just let them be born here and just make sure they're assimilated. Make sure they grow up feeling American. So anyway, we continue. "The one absolutely certain way of bringing this nation to ruin, of preventing all possibility of its continuing to be a nation at all, would be to permit it to become a tangle of squabbling nationalities, an intricate knot of German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans, French Americans, Scandinavian Americans, or Italian Americans, each preserving its separate nationality, each at heart feeling more sympathy with Europeans of that nationality than with the other citizens of the American Republic." Now, what Teddy Roosevelt didn't know is the biggest group of all of these was going to be Mexican Americans. And of course, there's other nationalities as well, other pockets, but the idea holds strong today. "The men who do not become Americans and nothing else are hyphenated Americans. And there ought to be no room for them in this country. The man who calls himself an American citizen and who yet shows by his action that he is primarily the citizen of a foreign land, plays a thoroughly mischievous part in the life of our body politic. He has no place here, and the sooner he returns to the land to which he feels his real heart allegiance, the better it will be for every good American. So a lot of things, I mean, this was spoken in 1915, 100 years ago, 110 years ago. And it holds true today, maybe even more true. I don't know the condition of the United States back then, but it's very true today. I mean, in a lot of these sentences, a lot of these ideas you can apply to Mexican Americans in particular, but really any first generation American. The reason I hone in on Mexican Americans, partly because I am one, but more so because they're such a big group, a large majority, and especially because all the Hispanics kind of blend in. You see a Hispanic person and you assume they're Mexican, I feel like. That's just me, I don't know. But yeah, that's why they're able to congregate and kind of isolate themselves, because they all speak Spanish. I mean, it's one of the most spoken languages in the world. Of course, it's going to be easy for them to find each other and avoid speaking English. And like I said, isolate themselves and stay away, keep their own community intact away from the rest of the United States and not assimilate. So a lot of these ideas, the ruin of the nation being in part due to people not identifying fully with the United States. I mean, like I said, if the people in your community don't identify with your community, they have no vested interest in it. And so if they don't have a vested interest, well then they're just here to extract resources, send them back to whatever country they more identify with, and everyone's better off. You know, they should be happy. They're going to wherever their hyphen is, and we'll be better off without them because they don't support our community. So that's all there is to say. Delia Ramirez, let's start a petition. Denaturalize and deport Delia Ramirez.